All right, so it's time to get down to business and to the reason you're watching this. Our topic this time is, you want to guess? That's right, very important. I know I say that every training, but the reality is they're all very important. But this particular important training is on accident investigation and how to successfully investigate incidents and accidents as they occur. The first noteworthy point is to clarify the two terms I just used in the previous sentence. An incident, also known as a near miss, is mostly defined as an unplanned event that did not result in injury, illness, or damage, but had the potential to do so. Only a fortunate break in the chain of events prevented an injury, fatality, or damage. In other words, a miss that was nonetheless very near. An accident, on the other hand, is defined as an unplanned event that results in personal injury or property damage. The important distinguishing factor is that the accident is causing some type of damage to either a person or property. We easily think about a person being involved in an accident, but we don't necessarily classify property or equipment damage as an accident. The reason we do is because that property could have just as easily been a person, and we need to treat the situation with the same energy and scrutiny we would if it were in fact a person. So even though they're both important terms, remember the difference between accident and incident. Before we get into the necessary steps to conduct a successful accident investigation, it's important to discuss why these investigations are so critical to your organization's operation. The sad reality is, far too many locations are having incidents and accidents, but aren't doing anything after they happen to ensure these very same or even related incidents don't happen again. Let's take the case of near-miss incidents. When you experience a near miss, are you reporting it? Are you giving you and your team an opportunity to assess why the incident happened and how things might change so they don't happen again? Too often we have an unplanned event that occurs that could have caused serious injury or death, and we barely escape. Unfortunately, after we do, and after we're done cleaning our drawers and checking to see if anyone saw, we move right on to something else without ever considering that this same incident might very well happen again to myself, or even worse, my teammates. Let me make this next point crystal clear. When you choose to keep a near-miss incident to yourself and you don't allow the investigation process to unfold, you're literally allowing a life-stealing, life-maiming, and life-killing presence to remain close to you and your teammates. Now, as we talk about the necessary steps to follow in order to create a successful accident or incident program, we can't do any of what I'm asking you to do if you don't have the first step in place, and that is having a plan or structure. Hang with me because I'm going to dive into that specific step in the next section. When we think about the necessary steps needed to create and implement a successful incident investigation, we have to begin with the very obvious but often overlooked first step of actually having a plan and structure in place to conduct these investigations. So, the very first thing you need to do is ensure you have an individual or group that is tasked to take the lead on these investigations. And not only to take the lead, but be willing and able to follow them through to the end. Typically, we recommend that the person in this role be a manager, supervisor, worker representative, or safety committee member. However, even though we need at least one person to take the lead, it's always a best case scenario when you can have a mix of these roles coming together to create an investigation team. Now, it's also a great idea to have some tools available to you and your team when you begin the investigation process. If you've never gone through an investigation before, it can feel a little overwhelming, especially if it's based on a serious accident to one of your teammates. So having tools like an investigation checklist, an investigation form, and a smartphone or a camera will be pretty important. And even if you've conducted these before, using these tools every time you do an investigation will keep you on track, asking the right questions, and not allowing any important information to fall through the cracks. Also, regarding the overall plan, be sure your plan covers the proper PPE that might be needed during the investigation. You never want to put yourself in a situation that would cause even more harm. The second step in the investigation process goes hand in hand with how we ended the last section, and that's inspecting the site of where the incident or accident took place. But before you do so, you must make sure that all of the hazards have been eliminated. The best way to do this is to clear the area, tape it off or block it off, and ensure no one outside of the investigation team can enter. Now, this may seem a little too detective-like, but the fact remains. These matters need to be taken seriously, and we never want to allow anyone back on the scene if it's not deemed safe. We also don't want anyone messing with equipment, tools, or work areas that are critical to discovering the root cause of the incident or accident. When things get moved, it's tough to know what happened. In other words, don't tamper with the evidence until the team has finished that part of the investigation. It's important to note that this is also the time to follow the lockout tagout protocols for any equipment or tools that may have contributed to the incident or maybe near where the incident took place. Again, we don't want anyone going into an area until it's completely safe. Also, ensure that your plan covers the ways you're going to contact any family members or other staff that may need to be aware of what happened. Now, in the case of an accident involving an injury, it's very important you take note of the employee's full name, date of birth, contact information, the nature of the injury, where the worker was taken for care, how he or she got there, and you'll also want to include the job title as well as the years of experience in that role. Now, when you're beginning your investigation, you're going to want to assess the direct and indirect cause. The direct cause is typically defined as the precise tool, equipment, material, or object that caused the worker's injury. The indirect cause is usually defined as the method of operation being utilized, the policies that could have contributed, the management's role, or even the environment of the workplace at the time of the incident. As you conduct these investigations, please remember that your job is not to go on a witch hunt and find someone to blame. Your job is simply to gather as much evidence as you can to keep the same thing or even a similar thing from ever happening within your operations again. While you're still at the scene and gathering evidence, one of the most critical tools you can have is a camera. The good thing is that nearly every one of you have a phenomenal camera in your pocket or your purse as we speak. This ability to capture the scene from multiple angles will allow you and your investigative team to better frame what really happened. These pictures should include the location and environmental factors of the injured worker, the tools or equipment being used, as well as the material or object that was present in the process. It's also important to take pictures of the presence of, or the lack of, personal protective equipment and other safety devices and safety measures utilized or should have been utilized in that particular work area. Here's the deal though. When you take pictures, be sure you have a way of getting these pictures and videos to a device like your computer where they can be effectively utilized as a part of the investigation. Far too often, we see some pictures being taken, but there's no plan to gather all of the notes and pictures in one place that can then be reviewed for what they are, the critical ingredients of the investigation where, if left out, could create an entirely different outcome that may or may not be accurate. And let me quickly add that if you all need assistance conducting an accident investigation, reaching out to OSHA, dealing with any of their compliance requirements, or anything related to this topic, please reach out to us for help. This is what myself and my consulting team do every single day, and we want you to be successful in that process. The third step of the investigation process has to do with interviewing your fellow teammates. The teammates you want to engage are those eyewitnesses that were directly involved in the incident, those that saw the incident happen, those who rushed to the scene right after the event, anyone who saw things building up to the incident, and any teammates that have special knowledge about the processes, equipment, material, and any other pertinent information about the general work area. When you begin these interviews, it's important you pull them aside separately so they can freely talk about the things they saw from their perspective. If you conduct the interviews in a big group, it typically doesn't go well because everyone has a slightly different take on what happened and how it happened. All of those perspectives are important as you seek to put together the pieces of what happened, so interview them separately. It's also important to interview the teammate that was hurt. Sometimes you rely too much on the witnesses and not enough on the individual or individuals that were directly affected. Now, it's also important to note that when you're conducting these interviews, don't come at anyone with any kind of attitude or blame. Even though some irresponsible practices may have led to the accident, we have to create an environment of trust so we can get to the root cause of what happened so the same accident doesn't happen again. Approach everyone you're interviewing with the belief that they are dealing with some sort of emotion about the incident or accident, whether that be fear of the incident happening to them, fear of losing their job, or even anger towards a teammate for the incident ever happening. You just never know, and you have to remain calm and focused on the facts. Now, after the statements have been taken, it's important you get the witnesses to sign their report after you review it with them. I know this may sound like a lot of red tape, but I assure you, each step in the process is not only critical to the case itself, but potential legal cases that can arise after events happen. It's just the society we live in, and it's what we need to do. Now that you've conducted the interviews, you can start to look a little deeper at both the physical evidence and the pictures you gathered at the scene, which happens to be the fourth step. Some of the things you'll want to check are: number one, were the tools and equipment working properly? If not, you may need to get the assistance of the product manufacturer to assess if there might be any flaws or similar incidents that they're aware of and in what types of settings. Number two, you can also check the product manual to see if your team has been using a tool or piece of equipment against manufacturer recommendations. Here's a perfect example from one of our previous trainings. How many of you use ladders? Do you ever stand on the top rung, carry materials while climbing, weigh more than the capacity of the ladder? All of those are discussed in the owner's manual for the product, but they're things we quickly pass over because we know better than them and we've done it for years, so we know what we're doing. That is, until we don't and it catches up with us. But anyway, you'll want to thoroughly investigate the evidence you collected and the pictures that were taken. And believe me, this process doesn't have to take very long. I know it sounds like I might be asking you to conduct a full-on CSI New York homicide investigation, but the reality is, each of these steps can be done in a very short period of time, depending on the severity of the accident or incident. So don't ever think you don't have the time to investigate a scenario that could have caused someone harm or death. There's always time for that. The fifth and final step is preparing your final report. In this report, you'll want to provide all of the evidence you collected, clearly define both the indirect and direct causes, provide recommendation on changes within your PPE, equipment, materials, processes, and policies, and finally, be sure you note when the report was created, who received the briefing on the findings, and ensure training or retraining is conducted in the needed areas. I hope that through this training, you realize just how important these investigations are. Whether it's a near miss or an accident, we never want to leave possible injuries, death, or destruction sitting at our doorstep, waiting to get in. I'm Jake Wolfenden, and even if we don't know you, we genuinely care about your health and your well-being. I'll see you in the next training.